Hi, my name is Hannah Putt, and the activist for social change that I chose for this project is Nelson Mandela. To start, I'd like to give a little bit about Nelson Mandela and the timeline of which his life took in fighting for social justice from a young boy to eventually the end of his life. Nelson Mandela was born on July 18th, 1918 in Mvezo, the Transkei, South Africa. He was led to study at the University College of Fort Hare, where he was eventually forced to leave due to student protests. From this point, he moved to Johannesburg to avoid an arranged marriage and made contact with the African National Congress. In December of 1942, he received his bachelor degree of art from Fort Hare and began legal studies while joining the infamous Alexander bus boycott. A year later, Congress Youth League was founded by Mandela, and he began his fluent fight as a civil rights activist and struggles in his journey of being arrested and released several times, one sentence being life imprisonment. The family of Nelson Mandela explained his character from a very young age as bright with leadership qualities. Lim, 2008. Mandela's father was chief counselor to the king of a local society in his home village, which included him in the royal family in a South African political association. This is very important in what was a catalyst to start his journey being a civil rights activist. The surroundings of his neighborhood disguised deeper troubles such as dispossession, colonization, and racism through a white government. The sudden decline of his father's interest in life outside of the working class signaled to Mandela that life was not destined to be easy. Lim, 2008. Africans were soon restricted from land, equal work opportunities, and their own culture in this period, and Mandela had begun school and his long fight for justice as a minority. Nelson Mandela is specifically of interest to me due to his resilience. I feel as though our global history, there are few people that would experience as much repression as Mandela did, end up imprisoned many times, spending almost half his life detained, and still come out of the shadows ready to finish what he started. His affiliations as far as being a civil rights activist are this. In 1944, Nelson Mandela joined a Black libertarian group called the African National Congress, as mentioned before. He soon became the leader of its youth league. Quote, Mandela subsequently held other ANC leadership positions, through which he helped revitalize the organizations and oppose the apartheid policies of the ruling National Party. The editors of Encyclopedia Britannica, 2019. Mandela's background in law practice led him to establish South Africa's first Black law practice and produce specialization in cases that resulted from apartheid legislation. His activist movements led Mandela to be a target for authorities, leading him to abandon these nonviolent protests and instead became the founder of Umkhonto we Sizwe, the military wing of the ANC that encouraged acts of sabotage against South African regime. The editors of Encyclopedia Britannica, 2019. In 1944, Mandela was sworn in as the president of South Africa's first multi-ethnic government, where he established the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which aimed to investigate human rights violations under apartheid. Obviously, there was much that happened between these two events, and we'll get to that later. Although Mandela's affiliations and group advocacy seemed to be ever-changing throughout his life, it is evident that he maintained a fight for social justice through activism and tested the waters in many types of retaliation against a discriminatory government in order to achieve his goals. No matter his circumstance, he would find a new way to advocate for human rights and social justice. Here I'll describe the evolution of his advocacy in terms of changing throughout forms of activism. Quote, Mandela formed and joined many organizations and alliances during his lifetime and continues to be a symbol of power that one individual has to make a difference. As Mandela put it, quote, there is no passion to be found in playing small, in settling for a life that is less than one you are capable of living, end quote. Donnelly, 2018. He began using his political status of being part of the royal family to amplify his voice in form of peaceful, nonviolent protest around the nation. When he became a target for authorities and was banned from protesting in many areas of his community, he chose the other route of reform. Through his underground activity, Mandela began his story of resilience and quite literally gaining the courage to do anything he could to keep his cause alive and turn over that South African rule. I believe this part of his journey emphasizes the changes he made in his activism to continue on regardless of circumstances, yet he stayed relatively true to his original purpose in achieving his goals. From 1964 to 1982, Mandela was incarcerated and subsequently kept at a maximum security prison until February 11, 1990, when he was released from prison. The editors of Encyclopedia Britannica, 2019. In his time being incarcerated, Mandela was offered freedom at the cost of recognizing the newly independent status of the Transkei Bantustan and agreeing to reside there, as well as the offer of freedom if he chose to renounce the use of violence. After this offer, Mandela's character shows in moments that he both refuses both offers and insists that only a free man can engage in such negotiations. This was at the hopes of being freed and in productive communication with South African government. The main shift I found in Mandela's style of activism over his life is the mentality of nonviolence and persistence evolving into a whatever it takes form of protest. This was created after being silenced, ignored, and banned from his first attempts to reform social justice. In terms of gaps in Mandela's work, the strength and resilience of the efforts produced by Mandela to promote social justice are difficult to make improvements to. In fighting for the rights of African Americans in South Africa, there seems to be no further groups brought into context, such as gender or class discrimination. This is something that Mandela could have had an impact on, considering his achievements of just fighting for the racial group itself. Here I find a gap in terms of the matrix of oppression which he was fighting for. To increase the effectiveness of his work, it is obvious that he would have much further progressed if he was not incarcerated for 27 years of his life. Although this brought the unity of the people, as they all decided to amplify his voice in the community in honor of his work while being detained, it was a major road bump in the progression of reversing discrimination and racism in South Africa. I would compare Nelson Mandela's fight to that of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who is notorious of peaceful protest for an elongated period of time in order to see change and reform in government. Growing a following and remaining lawful during the fight against racial oppression had much success for Dr. King. The ultimate charge against Mandela came after creating his underground organizations, going against the laws of South Africa and creating more reason for his arrest. I believe the incarceration of Mandela held its place in his journey, showing resilience against the corruption, and ultimately led to a greater success upon being released. Overall, I feel as though each part of his journey had a place and a time, and everything led to the success we see today in a much changed society and mentality against racism.